Hello, welcome to 30 Minutes. I'm Rick Anthony. When I was in the corporate world, I had a CEO who, when things weren't going so well, threw up his hands and exclaimed, "Tutto broke." Everything is broken in Italian. That's certainly the way things feel these days, and probably will for some time to come, regardless of the outcome of the midterm elections. Kids are behind in school because of the COVID shutdowns. Teachers and parents are in a tug of war about primacy over students and who decides what's included in the school's curriculum. In the midst of that, we now have a growing number of media literacy training programs being introduced into our education system. According to the Center for Media Literacy, a leading advocacy group, media literacy provides a framework to assess, analyze, evaluate, create, and participate with messages in a variety of forms, from print to video to the internet. In other words, media literacy is the ability to apply critical thinking skills to the messages, signs, and symbols transmitted through mass media. Media literacy is lauded by proponents as an essential 21st century skill, and I agree with them, but it's not new. There were efforts in the 1920s and 30s in Britain and the United States to teach analytical skills to media users. Those efforts were aimed at protecting students from the media. Today's efforts are aimed at teaching students how to become more informed, thoughtful media consumers. Here to discuss media literacy training is my good friend, Dr. Hillard Pouncy, a good friend and author, speaker on socioeconomics as well as communications. In fact, Hillard and I both have extensive backgrounds in mass communications. Hillard, nice to see you again. Always a pleasure to be here with you. It's been a long time.
It's been a very long time, Rick.
COVID separated us for months and months and months. But we're here to make it up.
That's right.
Yes, and comes with some, maybe a consensus.
Oh, don't.
No, just too much to hope for.
We're here together in the same room at the let's start there.
Right, all right. Let's see first if you agree with the definition of, we should do that, shouldn't we? Agree on a basic definition? That media literacy training is the ability to apply analytical thinking skills to messages, signs, and symbols transmitted through mass media. That reminds me of the old definition of effective communication that we both learned when we were in undergraduate school studying communication. You know, there's the uncoding, there's the transmission, there's the decoding, and then there's the feedback. Remember that cycle?
Well, Rick, I get what do they expression, a nosebleed when I get too high up in the air, or I get too when a level of when things become abstract.
Yeah.
So I like to keep my feet on the ground.
Okay. So
my experience with quote unquote media literacy goes something like this. I'll give you two quick stories. One, the last time I was in a classroom, the semester would begin with a librarian coming over to help students understand how to control information in their papers so that my demands for evidence, and I shouldn't personalize it, the school's demands for evidence and concerns over plagiarism would be clear ahead of time, and it would be understood as important. So the instruction took over my entire class, and I got quite a lot of it out of it myself. And they were in effect saying the internet is Google search and other tools on the internet are so powerful that we need to integrate them into a world that center them in a world that academics require. Academics, the media may have changed, academics have not changed. And it'd be a simple example would be you read on the internet that I can't even give a good example, but all things are red, just to be abstract.
Yeah, okay.
And you put that in your paper, and then as your teacher, I say, how do you know that, or where did this come from? And the idea was to say, it's what you gain from the internet is exposure to possibilities, but what you lose from the internet is the concern over what should you trust. So the idea would be like Ronald Reagan would say, what is it? Verify.
Trust but verify.
Trust but verify. Something like that.
Good rule.
Yeah. But I think my anecdote is fairly clear that there was a highly contained activity based around how to use the internet for an academic purpose, and in that highly subscribed arena, that to me became what media literacy was, and I didn't see a controversy about that. It seemed to be highly functional.
No, I would agree.
The second anecdote I'll give goes something like this. I like you, I love music, just a big fan. And I'm a subscriber to Spotify. And I can spend an evening on Spotify looking at every symphony conducted by my favorite conductors. And then when I tire of that, I can go back in time to some classic albums in any genre I want. And I come away from that with the powerful sense that the internet has made me the master of time and space. And I can imagine how someone many years younger than me could have that experience and then imagine the internet as all powerful and all knowing. So the possibility that maybe I might want to balance that or explore that it would be useful. For example, if at my age, I know when Spotify is wrong. And it's not even a problem. It's like Spotify doesn't know Dylan's first album as well as I do. And so when I interrogate Spotify, I use it. I don't suspend critical judgment.
Yes.
But because it's so powerful, for even a person like me, I can imagine why you would have a media literacy element to even under a high school program. So we can start there. So I've left the door open for what might be a less clearly defined example of media literacy than the one I'm used to, because I personally can fall into a trap of thinking the media or online learning is all powerful. It just seems so easy.
But philosophically, I think what you're saying, I understand what you're saying. Like most things in nature, this pencil is neither inherently good or bad. It's the use to which we put it that determines its value and its moral value, right? Media is neither good nor bad, depending upon the use it's put to and the extent to which it is abused, as this pencil can be abused. I think that's the real issue for me anyway. We have an asset that is available to all of us, that is used, abused, and overused because people are encouraged to do it. There's a commercial value in promoting it and manipulating people to feel that they are so dependent on the internet and therefore media. Is there therefore a need, my first question to you, for media training, media literacy training? And if there is a need, who should be the principal beneficiaries of that? Everybody? Just highly educated, very bright students? Or the masses, most of whom wouldn't understand what analytical thinking is, critical analytical thinking is all about? There's a democracy dimension.
I'm going to interrupt you because I'm gobsmacked.
You're what?
I'm gobsmacked.
Oh.
No, we've come from the COVID interlude with, at least maybe I'm the one who changed, but you're making sense to me. And I
didn't have COVID.
No, well, I didn't either.
I had the shots.
I had all the shots, but no. In all seriousness, I think you've set the table pretty well on this. Here's where I'm going to part company with you, but it's narrow in scope. I'm not usually we're kind of way out here, but it's so. The question I thought you would have asked was not who should benefit from it, but who should make the rules. How should you decide on?
It's on the paper.
Well, do we have to go step by step? Who decides, I think, is the key. And
who decides what?
Who should have a media literacy course? What should be in it, et cetera,
okay.
things like that. And so I'm just going to jump start now because I'm not in. I think you're leading me down I think you're leading us on a well-defined path. I can anticipate, and so I'm just going to cut to the chase. So, in another life, I'm in the middle of a project called First Generation Career Seekers. Does that make any sense at all?
Yes, it does.
What do you think that means?
It means people who haven't had a job before.
No, they've had it. I'm sorry.
It says first generation career seekers.
So.
Oh, they have had jobs, but not necessarily career paths.
They come from families where they're the first in their family to have a professionalized job.
Okay. Yes.
The other version of it is they're the first in their family to go to college.
Okay.
So here the presumption is you're gonna make it to college. You're not the first in your family. You are the first in your family.
I'm sorry, I'm distracted a little bit. Why are you limiting it to college? Why couldn't it be vocational school or training of any kind?
But that's why that's the nuance. In other words, career seeker could be someone who wants a professionalized job, which could mean you could get that. You wouldn't have to go to college to get that. So we've anticipated that concern. But in order to, the leap I was making was that in order to work around this idea of creating, quote unquote, a space for the first generation career seeker at a community college, why do I have to do that? Well, the answer is when you're a youngster and your parents, and you want to go to a place, social space that your parents didn't go to, there can be real problems. The most obvious one is a money problem. Your parents are poor and they can't afford to send you someplace. In fact, what they need from you is an earner in the family. So the ability for you to go get a training is at odds with the family's need for you to have money in your pocket when you come home. This is rudimentary. There's no challenge to this. But the higher level problem is and you've seen this, I don't know, maybe in my own family, I've seen it. When you're the first in your family to go to a certain new location, when you come home, can you imagine the conversation? Who filled your head with these highfalutin ideas? And there's a discipline, an academic discipline around it. It's called cultural capital. And it means, how do you deal with the idea that if you want to be the youngster who at some point in life presides over a major company or a major part of a company, so you have to deal with people from all walks of life, all kinds of flexible circumstances. How do you train for that? But your family of origin is highly rigid and is unable or unwilling to share, to help you on your journey.
And in fact, resents.
And in fact, impede your journey. The relevance of that discussion is when you're imagining media training, media literacy in the aggregate, it's one size is going to fit all. Well, that would be a problem because the same thing that can happen when a youngster wants to do things that are different from the family of origin is comfortable with, media learning is in the same ballpark. A thing that helps a youngster in my class navigate a college is going to be possibly very different from a youngster from a traditional family. I went to Boston College, so I can speak from that location. In my experience, if I'm sending my kid to a parochial school, there's some stuff on the internet I would want my kid protected from. So this adventure with me, go out there and learn stuff on the media, but then learn how to temper it, might be a challenge for me in my household. So what I would suggest is the secret to this idea of media literacy would be who gets to make the decision. And in a local school or a local setting, the appropriate version of media literacy would fit. In other words, it may not be the kind of media training I would want for my kid, in my school system, but it might be appropriate for a kid in the school system down the road. So one size wouldn't fit all.
I need some clarity. So is your issue who would make the decision? Is the decision which program would be used, or would the decision be who is to benefit from the program, whichever program is selected?
I would go,
or is it both?
I would go with who's going to make the decision. In other words,
which decision?
Of which kind of media literacy and the content you're going to have. Because, and here's why. Because if you're in the abstract leaving it to professionals to decide, sooner or later there's going to be a conflict in the home between what you're doing in the school and what the parents who allegedly are paying for all this are gonna see. So you might as well, from the get-go, include some sort of decision-making structure that takes account of the life of the student, the parents, and all involved in their lives, so that the school and the family are as harmonized as best as possible. And the reason I'm comfortable saying that is my experience is that young people are very resilient. And they survive our families. I think we both can speak to that in person.
You've anticipated one of the questions I wanted to ask, and that was the extent to which parents should participate in deciding whether a program will be provided, and then which program will be provided.
Yeah,
and to whom. I mentioned this to you as we were discussing this in advance. Because of COVID, because of economic conditions, because of social and cultural issues. Well, you know the number better than I. X% of students in the third grade or whatever can't read. They're not capable of any analytical thinking. What percentage of college freshmen can't read and aren't capable of analytical thinking? So somewhere along the line, they have to be trained and to develop the skill that they're being invited to apply to media literacy.
Okay, no, that's interesting. So I'll respond.
There's a precursor to this.
I would respond. And to me, the decision rule would be something like, as much as possible, include participatory decision making for a course like this. But my definition of participatory would be the family, because if the kid can't read at the third grade level, at some given age beyond third grade, that's probably a good tell that that's where that family is. So if the family has got issues, and this is why I went to the cultural capital issue, if they're going to be resistant or threatened by what's the kid getting something that they didn't get, then just deal with it and say, look, it's your family. You're paying taxes. You've got to live together. This is what you and your family feel is relevant, important, and we'll provide. And we're a service needs meeting organization, school systems. So we will meet the needs of the family. And if the family, in fact, goes to the extreme, says, I don't want any of that fern stuff going on in school, just have to live with that. Now, the reason I'm sanguine about this, because I know I'm supposed to be this liberal guy who says, oh, we've got to fix the kid, fix the system. The reason I'm sanguine about it goes like this. There are two reasons I'm sanguine. One, I've already tipped my hand. I think kids are resilient. And and you have to pick your battles if you're a kid. And so if the family doesn't want you on the internets in a safe way, then they've opened up the door for you to be on the internets in an unsafe way. And they'll have to live with the consequences until they see them for themselves. That's sad, but true. That's the reason you have such a course, so that youngsters are provided, coached, and circled so that the internet's made safe for them. And if the parents don't see it, that's all you get out. You know,
it's a wonderfully idyllic scenario.
But most times people learn through feedback loops.
That you have structured. However, in the real world, we both know that it's the elitists who are making these decisions.
No, Rick.
It's the elitists who are putting these programs together.
No, Rick.
And my concern, let me finish, please. And my concern is, and I know you have an issue with this, you don't agree with me. My concern is that many of these programs are behind the veil. You don't know who's really sponsoring them. Therefore, you don't really know the agenda. Therefore, there is a risk with these kinds of programs. If you take a look at what's available now, because it's a scattergun approach, there's no standardization, no centralization, the concept of which I would be against anyway. Nonetheless, there's a need for some kind of regulation. Otherwise, Planned Parenthood could sponsor a program that would clandestinely somehow promote its agenda, or Oath Keepers, an extreme right white supremacist group, could put up the money to sponsor a program to promulgate its ideology. It's conceivable, and it's more than conceivable because that's what's happening now in the schools. Planned Parenthood and other cause groups, climate change, et cetera, are doing exactly that. They're putting up the money, sponsoring the programs, and with the help of the teachers union, just infiltrating the schools with programs about which parents know absolutely nothing until COVID and online learning. That's when parents found out what was going on in the schools. You know that as well as I. That was the trigger.
So I promised my wife that I wasn't going to take the bait. I promised her. I said, "You know what he's like. I suspect you do it for your ratings." I don't.
I meant what I just said. I'm not trying to debate you.
It doesn't matter what the motive is. It's the product that we're for all to see. And so I said, I'm not going to take the bait. So I'm going to handle this way. So I'm going to just use my own personal experience. And I remember in being in school, and this was before we had the internet, et cetera. Yeah. And I went to a public school. And we were next to a college town. This was outside of New Brunswick. So they'd use these New Brunswick grad students to come over. And one of them told the class that something about Christ symbols in Hemingway's novels. And I thought, I better learn that because I want to do well on the SAT. And so I was like, Christ symbols, what the heck is that? The next class, there was this guy showed up and he handed out word puzzles and he said, "Class, for the rest of the semester, I'm just going to bring in these word puzzles for you to do because the school board has told me that I'm not on the reservation anymore." He had offended some parent or group of parents by bringing religion into the classroom. And I never figured out quite what happened, but there's what happened. And the lesson of that is it doesn't take a conversation about the internet to have problems with teachers and schools and kids and parents. That seemed to me to be a steady state condition. So the internet is just a variation on a theme that I've been exposed to for some time. So it's not some new thing and we've got to light our hair on fire because the internet's coming. That said, I also thought that the reasonable way because there is a real benefit to the internet and a real danger to the internet.
Agreed.
And I thought the reasonable position was to try to fit it in as much as possible to well understood ideas for making decisions at the local level. And my understanding was schools in many cases can do a very good job of taking their context into consideration. Now, you're claiming, no, that's not right, Hillard. Until COVID came along, when parents could go online and see what's going on, they didn't know. And I think I tried to point out, they seem to have known, Rick, at least in my high school, the very next day when the teacher said something some parent didn't like, they got that guy shut down. So I'm challenging you on that claim. And
when that fuse was lit, it exploded all over the place.
Rick, I'm gonna ask you to give me the chance to complete my chain because I actually sat here because I didn't want to take the bait. So the first point I'm making is the simple answer is this is nothing new. There are lots of we can go back in time and see the issue, and we can locate the problem within a context of decision making. To the elements of best practice from before. And the best practice I'm aware of is local control of decision making. Make the school responsive to parents. They're paying the taxes.
Totally agree.
The second reason I'm almost amused by where you want the discussion to go goes something like this. I'll use a pithy example, to kind of break through. Imagine, if you will, a group of people with deep concerns about what's going on now in the classrooms. And behind the people doing a lot of huzzing, the school building is burning down. And they don't seem to have noticed, okay? That's a metaphor I'm going to use, and here's why. Because the real problem with the internet isn't whether Planned Parenthood or the Oath Keepers or some group has tried to put money into funding of their theory of how to teach media literacy, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think they could do it, but even if they could, the real problem with the internet goes something like this. The youngsters who get on the internet can go way faster and do better things and get into bigger trouble than either of us could imagine. The real problem I noticed during COVID was the ability for youngsters who had gotten bored to get on TikTok and change the world with their dancing videos, or their ability to get on Zoom sessions that their parents were running, to make money and photobomb them. The youngsters understand how to program, what's behind the scenes of the internet. And that's where the real, quote unquote, learning and interest in what's ethical ought to be conducted. But I don't know a single person my age who could run a course like that. Okay, I'm exaggerating. There are probably a few. But that's the real problem of, should we teach programming as a mandated subject for all youngsters so that every kid has this equal chance of making a living where the real action is going to be in the future? And should programs like that give even a little bit of concern to what's use is being made of the programming and algorithms I'm writing? Are algorithms going to be routinely advantaging males over females, immigrants over, all that kind of stuff? That's where the real action is. And we're never going to come even close to that. So some trivial media literacy course that, in my opinion, was designed to make sure kids could write a good essay and get an A in a college course that got transferred down the line so that youngsters could get online and be safe or understand or defend themselves against an avalanche of knowledge that seems so right. To me, that was the motive. That was at least my understanding of the motive. Could that get hijacked and taken over by poor...
Yes.
Then great. That's that.
Yes, the answer is yes. Not only could be, it probably will be.
Okay.
Because there's profit and there's power.
Okay, Rick. The point I would make.
And this has no inherent value except the extent to which it is put to use or misuse. Same with the internet. And we're not just talking about the internet. We're talking about social media, which is more pernicious than the internet.
When I go home tonight.
And you mentioned TikTok. I mean, you really hit a button. I have a real problem with TikTok.
Have you ever watched
But you know what it is, and you know where it came from, and you know what they're doing? What?
China.
The Chinese Communist Party. You know they're collecting data on all of our kids.
But
you do know that.
But it's damn.
You do know that?
It's damn good.
You do know that?
But Rick.
Do you know that?
But what I also know.
No, please answer my question.
But Rick,
do you know that they're collecting? Please answer my question.
But I also.
Do you know that they're collecting data on all of our kids?
We collect data on everything.
That's not my question.
We do it too.
I don't care about we. We're talking about a foreign government.
Yeah, but we're
talking about an enemy that's collecting data on our kids, and we're allowing it to happen. We're subsidizing it. That's stupid.
Yeah, well, you should see what we do to them. So the point.
No, that's not an answer.
Yes, it is, Rick. Yes,
you can't keep doing that.
Rick.
Yeah, but look over here.
No, Rick, because what you're doing.
No.
Because what you're doing is you've taken a bunch of concerns that I brought and gave careful attention to.
Yes.
And I laid them out as carefully as I knew how.
Yes.
And you refuse, in my opinion, to take any of it seriously.
No, not at all.
Well,
I agree with the substance. Please let me finish.
I'm speaking
I
for
agree
myself.
with the substance of your.
I'm speaking for myself.
I agree with the substance of what you said.
And in my view,
that decisions that affect the children are best made or shared at the local level
that I can reasonably respond to. So I'm going to go home and I'm going to say to my wife, I gave it my best shot.
Yeah.
He hasn't changed.
I'm not sure where we are on the issue. I think it's fair to say that media training or literacy training is here to stay.
No, I don't even agree with that.
Because There's a lot of money behind it.
I don't even agree with that.
Well, then do a little research.
No, Rick.
There's a lot of money behind it. There's a lot of power behind it.
Rick, if you're actually interested in having your audience learn something, media literacy courses, they're not robust. They're not meaningful. They're not careful. In places like where the librarian comes and stuff like that, where there's a serious, well-defined use, they'll be around, and precisely because they can be.
Well, if you're correct, then why permit them at all? It's a waste of time and money.
Well, the issue is,
could do some danger.
But even if you permitted them, if they're not relevant, if they're not working, why would anybody keep funding them?
Those who may have an agenda.
Yeah, but if it's not working. Look at the
ones that are in place now. They're all over the country, and they're all different.
If the real problem, as I've tried to suggest, is that youngsters are far beyond us in terms of what they do on the internet, that's particularly stuff that's dangerous, like the ability to organize a mass murder, then literacy training, I would imagine, sooner or later would be seen for what it is. It's a small issue for those of us like me, anyway, who find the internet a powerful tool. And at moments, I'd like to make sure I'm not being swamped. I'd like to know how to control and operate it. And in my classes, I'd like to make sure that people understand and control information by what are still considered academic standards. Beyond that, whatever else communities and third parties think they can do to young minds just by telling them what they should do on the internet, that's a hopeless journey.
I think you're being much
the youngsters I'm
dismissive of that side of the argument.
The youngsters I'm most exposed to at a meeting like this, they'd be looking at they wouldn't even be listening to us. So if you have a didactic instruction format to tell youngsters how to operate on the internet, you've already lost the game. If you really wanted to win, you'd create an app that said, hey, you win points if you act this way, you lose point. Make it a game or something. We don't even think like that. They do. That's why this is irrelevant in certain except in highly circumscribed ways.
I don't think it's irrelevant at all because it's so pervasive.
Oh, I tried.
No, and you failed again. It's so pervasive. And as I said, this has no value until it's put to use or misuse. I think there is the very high potential that media literacy training, unless it is regulated by a neutral, nonpartisan group of some kind, is able to have some influence over the content and the application, because I see no point in introducing it into a center city school where the kids don't even know how to read.
Well, that's a dire vision, Rick. I certainly hope we learn from it.
Yeah. And the lesson is teach the kids to read.
Okay.
But you would go beyond that, and you'd be right. You can't teach the kids to read in the school. It's got to at least be supported by and maybe start in the home.
Rick, I didn't actually say any of that. But,
I know you didn't.
But I don't think that really matters anymore.
I think that's what you would have said.
No, it's
because you've argued that in the past.
Rick, next time you want to do the show with me, just put a plant here, and then you just knock yourself out. I try. It's entertaining for me. But if you're actually hopefully going to take something away from our conversation, I would like you to.
What have we accomplished here today?
Well, can I make it take a fair shot at it?
Please do.
I think at least what I got out of the conversation was that there is, in our lives, and we both lived long enough to see it, a change in the relevance of communication and the means of communication. Yes. It's just impressive. I remember taking a class where the point of the class was you can never get people to change their mind. And now you can see in real life, somehow through communication, people running riot in the streets. It's unbelievable. Yeah. But the mechanisms for coping with that, with the social implications of the internet, I don't think that's addressed very well by quote unquote media literacy.
I agree with that.
I think media literacy in the original intent was to help control information and evidence linked to information. Once you go beyond that, I think you're on a hopeless journey, especially if you're dealing with a younger audience, because they don't respond to didactic instruction about this. Yeah. This is like a wormhole. And if you're talking about it instead of being on it, you're not reaching them. Yeah. So I really don't think there's much you're going to do. I think you could, even if your most dire forecast, people throwing money at it, I don't think it would reach the intended
I didn't
audience.
get into how it's being taught or how it's being presented. You got into that aspect of it.
Yeah, for a reason.
And I don't know anything about that.
Well, maybe that's relevant.
There's no
Rick.
information on it, and you're making it up.
Well, I actually did my thesis on stuff like that, so I might know a little bit.
I've taught courses in communication as well.
I know a few things too, Rick. I'm just saying.
I think I know something about about propaganda.
Well, Rick, that's something I did study.
I think I can match.
A little bit.
I can match you there.
I can mock you as easily as you can mock me. So.
I love this. This is great stuff.
Sure.
Okay, again, I'm not sure. Well, what I think we can be sure of is that there is a need for some kind of assistance for not just young people, adults as well, to learn how to use a powerful tool called the media and to be more discriminating and not allow themselves to be bombarded by a lot of information that is not tested, not verified, is just there, and just blindly, thoughtlessly take it in, and it becomes part of your ethos. That's what concerns me.
I would modify that. I would call it an aspiration. I wouldn't say that that would be a nice thing to be able to do. Yeah. I'm frankly not convinced that much of that is a realistic policy if you're talking about using media literacy as a way to deliver that policy.
No, I'm not saying that media literacy is necessarily the way to do it. I don't know. I don't have a solution. I'm just not satisfied that this is the way to do it.
I don't even think it's much of a problem, to be honest.
I know you've made that point, and I don't agree with you.
So we agree we're going to disagree?
Yes, we've always ended up that way.
We're back, baby.
We always end up that way.
We're back.
Yes. Where are we on time, Mr. Producer? You got to wrap it up? We have to wrap it up. But before we wrap it up, if you don't mind, I have an announcement to make. Based on my own very recent personal experience as a primary caregiver for my late wife, the love of my life, I'll be hosting a special monthly series here at MLTV 21. It's called Of, By, and For Family Caregivers. The brigade of 43 million unpaid family caregivers who devote themselves to assuring the well-being of care-dependent adults. The name of the series is Caregiver Assist, and my first guest will be Barry Jacobs, who has a PhD in clinical psychology and is nationally recognized as a leading authority on caregiving. In each 30-minute program, we will feature frequently asked questions about family caregiving and invite viewers to submit questions, and we'll try to, as best we can, to be helpful. So until next time, thank you, Hillard. This is 30 Minutes. I'm Rick Anthony. Take very good care of yourselves.